Cash Out just hit with life behind bars, and it's even worse than it sounds. With 70 years stacked on top of a life sentence, the rapper once destined for stardom is now locked away forever. But it's not just the sentence that's shocking, it's how deep this case really goes. Leaked prison footage, betrayal, and a twisted family empire. What really brought down Cash Out? Let's break it all down. By the time Cash Out walked into the Fulton County Superior Court on June 2, 2025, the world already sensed something serious was coming. But no one was prepared for the storm that followed. Once celebrated as one of Atlanta's rising stars in hip-hop, John Michael Hakeem Gibson, aka Cash Out, now stood accused of crimes that went far beyond the music. Charges included racketeering, aggravated sodomy, human trafficking, pimping, pandering, and unlawful restraint. And this wasn't just about one moment of bad judgment. It was a 7-year-long criminal enterprise, prosecutors claimed, that left behind a trail of damage and broken lives. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. For 7 weeks, the public got a raw, unfiltered look into what prosecutors described as a systematic, organized network of abuse. The most powerful blows didn't come from lawyers, they came from the victims themselves. One woman told the court she was only fed when she complied with commercial demands. Another, Cash Out's own ex-girlfriend, testified that he forced her to sleep with other men for money while they were still in a relationship. These weren't vague allegations, these were intimate, specific accounts of manipulation, coercion, and trauma. Prosecutors argued this wasn't the behavior of a rapper who'd lost his way. This was predatory control, calculated and executed with disturbing precision. Victims were allegedly isolated, their identities stripped, their needs weaponized. And as the testimonies poured in, the courtroom began to see it. This wasn't about celebrity, it was about power, and how far someone was willing to go to keep it. But as damaging as these stories were, what came next would bury Cash Out even deeper. If the testimonies revealed the horror, the evidence confirmed it in brutal detail. Prosecutors didn't just build a case, they built a fortress. Leading the charge was Fulton County Deputy District Attorney Ernell Winfrey, and she came in swinging. Her team presented what they called an airtight case: 8 cell phones, hundreds of text messages, jail calls, financial records, surveillance footage, and even Cash App transactions. The case wasn't built on guesswork, it was built on data, time-stamped and verified. Every record tied back to a deeper system. Messages outlined schedules and rules. Phone logs showed constant communication between Cash Out and his co-defendants, including his own mother and cousin. Financial trails tracked money from victims allegedly earned through exploitation, straight into accounts connected to the operation. But the most damning piece wasn't digital, it was human. The victims' stories aligned with the evidence, reinforcing what prosecutors described as a well-oiled machine of abuse. Some women were told what to wear, who to sleep with, and how much to charge. Others described being punished, isolated, or starved if they resisted. One victim broke down in court as she recalled being fed only when she complied. Another revealed how she was coached to avoid police and warned never to talk. The psychological control, the prosecutor said, wasn't random, it was tactical. This wasn't a disorganized mess of bad decisions. It was planned, structured, and designed to keep victims locked in a cycle they couldn't escape. Winfrey made it clear, this isn't just about pimping, this is trafficking. This is organized exploitation. And with each new piece of evidence, the case against Cash Out grew more terrifying, until even his defense team couldn't ignore what they were up against. As the prosecution laid out its case, Cash Out's defense team scrambled to find cracks in the armor. Led by attorney Curtin R. Matthews, their approach was simple but risky: discredit everything. They questioned the motives of the victims, pointing out inconsistencies in their testimonies. Matthews argued that some of the women had voluntarily reconnected with Cash Out after the alleged abuse, suggesting that these weren't victims but former associates with buyer's remorse. Others, the defense claimed, had changed their stories over time, making their credibility shaky. They also went after the structure of the case itself, claiming the state was stacking charges to make it look worse than it was. Matthews pushed back hard on the RICO charge, calling it a stretch. According to him, this wasn't an organized criminal enterprise, it was a collection of unrelated incidents exaggerated by prosecutors. To further cast doubt, the defense pointed out that some of the witnesses, especially co-defendants who had taken plea deals, had strong incentives to cooperate. How can you trust someone who's testifying to save themselves? Matthews asked the jury. But as the days went on, the cracks they tried to expose were buried under the weight of overwhelming evidence. The phone records, the financial documents, the testimonies, they all formed a picture too detailed to dismiss. Even if some statements had inconsistencies, the overall pattern was disturbingly consistent. And on July 18, 2025, the verdict was delivered. Guilty on multiple serious charges, including aggravated sodomy, trafficking for sexual servitude, and RICO violations. It wasn't a clean sweep. He was found not guilty on a few counts, but the jury had spoken. The evidence was too powerful to ignore. And the sentence he was about to receive? It would erase any hope of redemption. July 21st, 2025. Fulton County's Superior Court was packed, tense, and silent. All eyes were on the bench as Judge Melanie Leftridge prepared to deliver a verdict that would change lives forever. Cash Out, once a symbol of Atlanta's rising rap scene, now stood stripped of fame, flanked by guards waiting to hear the cost of his actions. The sentence? Life in prison, plus 70 more years. And the judge made sure he understood every part of it. On count 1, violation of the Georgia RICO Act, 20 years to serve in confinement, to run consecutive with count 10. On count 10, aggravated sodomy, life in confinement. Then came count 12, count 22, count 25. It went on and on, each sentence sealing his fate deeper. Some sentences would run concurrently, others consecutively. But the bottom line was clear. He would die behind bars. His mother, Linda Smith, wasn't spared either. She received 30 years. His cousin, Tyrone Taylor, was hit with life plus 70 years. The judge emphasized this wasn't just about crime. It was about abuse of trust, abuse of power, and the destruction of human dignity. As the courtroom absorbed the weight of it all, Cash Out spoke. Instead of remorse, he compared himself to Jesus, claiming he was falsely accused, insisting one day the truth will come out. He suggested the witnesses were bullied into testifying and that he was being targeted for his success. But the judge didn't flinch. This court has witnessed the very worst of human behavior toward others, and this sentence reflects that. With that, the doors closed on Cash Out's future. The rapper who once declared he was cashing out had officially lost everything. At first glance, Pyre's Music Group LLC looked like a promising indie label. It had all the markings of a grassroots success story, an Atlanta-based operation tied to a Billboard charting artist. But according to prosecutors, it was never about music. It was about manipulation, control, and cash. They allege that Cash Out used his label not to develop talent, but to recruit vulnerable women. Many of them believe they were being given a real shot at success. They were promised careers, connections, and fast money. Instead, they were allegedly isolated, exploited, and broken down. Prosecutors detailed how the label created a convenient cover. Recording sessions and meetings became opportunities to lure in victims. Behind studio doors, dreams turned into nightmares. Victims were stripped of IDs, cut off from their families, and instructed to never speak to police. Everything was controlled: when they ate, where they stayed, who they talked to.
And the money? That flowed straight up. Victims allegedly had to deposit cash in kitchen drawers or transfer it digitally to Cash Out or his mother. This wasn't chaos, it was a hierarchy, with the label functioning like the headquarters of a criminal empire. By building a business that looked legitimate from the outside, Cash Out allegedly created the perfect disguise. Prosecutors said it gave him access to new recruits, an excuse for irregular schedules, and a reason to associate with people from all walks of life, especially those most vulnerable to being taken advantage of. The court saw Pyre's music group not as a label, but as a machine for exploitation, carefully masked by fame and flashy beats. It wasn't just about selling records, it was about selling lies and profiting from pain.
Back in 2012, Cash Out was on top of the world. His breakout single, Cashing Out, became a national anthem, climbing the Billboard Hot 100 and dominating radio airplay. He was young, flashy, and fast becoming one of the South's most promising rap stars. The music industry welcomed him with open arms. He signed with Epic Records, linked up with Atlanta legends like Future, and even landed major remixes from names like Ludacris and Akon. His name was buzzing from clubs in Atlanta to stages in LA. But while the world saw a rapper living the dream, prosecutors say something darker was unfolding behind the scenes. According to their timeline, just as Cashing Out took over the airwaves in 2012, Cash Out was allegedly laying the groundwork for a criminal operation. What fans didn't know was that behind the studio lights, he was allegedly recruiting women, isolating them, and funneling their money into his pockets. It was the ultimate double life. By day, he was recording in studios and performing for fans. By night, he was allegedly building what prosecutors later called a trafficking empire. The public image was pristine: diamond chains, luxury cars, and radio interviews. But the documents, testimonies, and digital trails told a different story. And perhaps the most disturbing part? The two worlds overlapped. His music success gave him the platform to attract new victims. His label gave him a reason to stay close. And his fame made it harder for anyone to believe something sinister could be happening behind the curtain. In the end, it wasn't the music that brought him down. It was everything hidden in the silence between the beats.
This wasn't just a case of a rapper going off the rails. What made it truly disturbing was the alleged involvement of Cash Out's own family. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a family-run trafficking network, with each member playing a strategic role. At the center was Linda Smith, Cash Out's mother, known in court as Mama Cash Out. She wasn't just a passive bystander. According to testimony, she handled finances, supervised victims, and enforced control. Tyrone Taylor, Cash Out's cousin, was also heavily involved. Together, the three were accused of running a tightly controlled operation. The locations were strategic: a hotel off Fulton Industrial Boulevard, a residence in Atlanta's Carroll Heights neighborhood. These weren't random spots. They were, according to prosecutors, headquarters of exploitation. Women were moved in, stripped of their independence, and cut off from the outside world. The level of control was next level. Victims testified they were starved if they didn't cooperate, coached to avoid police, and even denied access to their own identification documents. Their basic human needs, food, shelter, safety, were turned into tools of psychological warfare. Prosecutors argued that this wasn't improvisation, it was designed. A system built not just to profit, but to break people. And the fact that it allegedly involved his own mother and cousin added a level of betrayal that stunned the courtroom. This wasn't about greed, it was about power and control, and using the trust of family bonds as weapons to dominate others. What should have been a support system became a trap. And when the truth came out in court, it shattered any illusion that this was just another celebrity scandal. This was a family business built on pain, and the cost was irreversible. Cash Out's downfall wasn't just the collapse of one artist's career, it was a warning shot to the entire hip-hop industry. His case marked the third major RICO prosecution targeting Atlanta rappers in recent years, following high-profile indictments against Young Thug and FYN Lucci. Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis made it clear, if your music label is hiding something criminal, you're going down. But that aggressive strategy has raised serious questions. Is the justice system cracking down on real crime, or is it profiling hip-hop culture under the guise of RICO laws? Critics argue that prosecutors are weaponizing rap lyrics and personas, treating artistic expression as evidence. Supporters say the cases are based on hard facts, surveillance, bank records, and victim testimony, not bars on a mixtape. In Cash Out's case, the evidence was overwhelming. It wasn't speculation, it was structure. It wasn't fame gone wild, it was fame used as a weapon. And now his name is etched into legal history, not for breaking records, but for breaking lives. The once glamorous image of Cash Out, the chains, the hits, the swagger, has been replaced by a prison ID and a legacy of pain. His sentence of life plus 70 years sends a chilling message. When fame is used to exploit, there is no stage big enough to hide behind. The community is still grappling with what it means. For some, it's a betrayal. For others, it's accountability. But one thing's for sure, this case will be studied, debated, and remembered for years to come. Because in the end, the music fades, but the damage, that stays.
Cash Out's story was supposed to be a win for the culture. A street kid turned rap star, beating the odds and stacking platinum plaques. But instead of using that platform to lift others up, prosecutors say he used it to trap, exploit, and destroy lives. From chart-topping artist to convicted predator, his rise and fall is more than just a cautionary tale. It's a reflection of what happens when power meets unchecked ego, and when fame becomes a mask for darker motives. No second chances, no comeback, just life in a cage and a legacy forever stained. Because the streets might forget a hit song, but they'll never forget how it all ended. And trust me, this isn't the last time you'll hear about RICO shaking up the rap game.